I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to TGU, the governance update from VLGA Connect, brought to you by the Victorian Local Governance Association, of course, and sponsored by Hunt & Hunt Lawyers. My name's Chris Eddy. You might not remember me. I haven't been here for a while, but I'm back, and I do want to say thank you to Stephen Cooper, who sat in the chair for the last 2 weeks and very capably made sure that this circus was kept in order. Tony Rownick is with us from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers. Hello, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. You look vaguely familiar, but
Yeah.
No, Steve
Thank you.
did an awesome job, and yeah, I'm sure he's listening. And hi to Steve, and thanks so much for your help.
And Julie Reid, hello to you.
Hi, Chris. Nice to have you back, and thanks again to Steve as well. So he took some great leadership in keeping us in order in the last
Excellent.
weeks.
Excellent.
So, anyway.
That's what I like to hear. One thing he didn't manage to do was stop Tony calling you Chris and Julie a couple of times.
Did happen a few times.
It's, old habits die hard, don't they?
The faux pas.
Terrible.
Yeah, that's right. That should go in the bloopers for the end of the year, I think.
That's
so
a big episode.
I have to tell you, I listened to the first episode while I was having a very gentle and casual walk around the streets of Napier in New Zealand.
Ooh.
We were on a cruise. My wife saw an unmissable special in the window of the beauty salon. So I thought, this is where I put my headphones on and listen to TGU for half an hour or so. And I thought you all did a terrific job.
Oh, thanks, Chris. That's really nice.
Excellent. All right, let's get into the news of the week. A big list of things to talk about, and we may not talk about all of these, but you never know. We might. There's another conduct matter, and I did appreciate your analysis of the Mornington Peninsula Shire Council matter last week, Tony. Here's another one. We're back to Hobsons Bay. I must admit, I get a little bit sad to see Hobsons Bay sort of punching above its weight in these conduct matters just of recent times. And again, it's featuring Daria Kellander and Tony Briffa. This time, Daria Kellander has been found to have engaged in misconduct, Tony.
That's right, Chris. So this particular conduct matter concerned an email and Facebook post by Councillor Kellander regarding a meeting that had been called by Councillor Briffa to discuss the mayoral and deputy mayoral roles and candidates for those roles.
And I think, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Briffa was the mayor at the time.
That's correct. Yes. So as Mayor, Councillor Briffa in September of last year, 21 September, sent an email to all councillors with this subject line, in confidence, discussion re next mayor and deputy, saying, given the election for the next mayor and deputy mayor is on 10 November, I would like the councillor group to get together to discuss who is interested in standing for these roles, any questions councillors have for each candidate, what support the prospective candidates have from each councillor, and what support or training the prospective candidates might need ahead of the vote. And then Councillor Kellander sent an email response to all councillors and to council staff about a month later on the 29th of October, where she said, I'd like to note that given this meeting is now 2 days away, only one councillor has reached out to me to share an intention to run for mayor. This is unlike previous years. Noting that the current mayor wanted to have this meeting behind closed doors a month in advance to anoint the new mayor, I suggest that a deal has already been done, of which I have no interest in being part of. Operation Sandon made it very clear that predetermining decisions in pre-organised meetings of the councillor group like this was collusive conduct and denies the community the ability to see decisions made. This conduct should stop, and I will not be a party to this discussion. And then a few days later, Councillor Kellander then made a Facebook post. It was on the 31st of October, i.e. Halloween. And Councillor Kellander said, I'll be out trick-and-treating with my 4-year-old tonight and not in a closed-door councillor-only meeting being told who they've chosen for mayor. Happy Halloween. Tonight, council is holding a closed-door councillor-only meeting to predetermine who the mayor, deputy mayor will be. And again, went on expressing concern about that process and it being a predetermined outcome. So the allegations against Councillor Kellander brought by Councillor Briffa were threefold. One was that the email response to all councillors and several staff failed to treat councillors and staff with respect under the standards of conduct. Two was that the public Facebook posts failed to treat councillors and the mayor with fairness, courtesy and respect. And three was that in relation to the Facebook posts, the comments, the responses, if you like, from members of the public maligning councillors and the council, allowing those responses to remain published amounted to misconduct as well.
Right.
And so Councillor Councillor Briffa, beg your pardon, in their evidence said that councillor-only meetings held every year to discuss forthcoming mayoral elections. It wasn't intended as a de facto election. It was a courtesy by them as mayor to allow councillors to have this meeting to discuss running for roles, providing guidance on the roles. Councillor Briffa was upset at the implication that there was something improper in the meeting, and in particular, the reference to IBAC's Operation Sandon and the implication of corrupt conduct. Councillor Kellander, in her evidence, said she didn't believe it was appropriate to have a council-only meeting to have these detailed discussions about the coming mayoral elections. She conceded that it might have been appropriate to have an informal discussion whether a particular council would want to run for mayor, etc. But she thought that the councillors shouldn't do so on council premises without the public invited. She said she didn't mean to imply that Councillor Briffa was corrupt. She conceded that the Operation Sandon report was actually largely about corruption in planning decisions, and offered to apologise to Councillor Briffa. Now, the arbiter, Dr. Lily O'Neill, her findings were that Councillor Kellander was entitled to hold the view that it was inappropriate to hold a councillor-only meeting to discuss the upcoming mayoral elections. She was also entitled to broadcast that view. However, this engaging in robust political debate doesn't give free rein to breach the standards of conduct. And allegation 1 was upheld with the finding that Councillor Kellander did breach the standard regarding treatment of others when she referred to Operation Sandon and used language collusive conduct in relation to this meeting being called. These references contained a clear implication that Councillor Kellander believed that the meeting was collusive conduct. That's an extremely serious allegation, should not be made lightly, as it could cause extreme damage to Councillor Briffa's reputation. The other allegations in relation to the Facebook post, firstly, were not upheld, were found not to be misconduct, found to be robust political debate. The arbiter said in relation to the Facebook post, she would give Councillor Kellander the benefit of the doubt. In relation to the public comments that remained on Councillor Kellander's Facebook page, the finding was that they would not discredit or mislead council or the public, primarily because a reasonable person wouldn't give them much weight. The arbiter described the tenor of most of these comments as a social media pile-on without much credibility. So Councillor Kellander used this argument that there's an implied right to freedom of political communication, and therefore that protected her from findings of misconduct. However, the arbiter said in response to that, look, there is a High Court case, it's called the Banerjee decision. It's where the High Court found an employee of a federal government department whose employment was terminated because of her tweets that were highly critical of the department, fellow employees, the government policies and politicians, didn't have the right to contravene the Australian Public Service Code of Conduct because of this implied right to freedom of political communication. And the position for councillors is analogous, whereby the standards of conduct aren't invalidated by this right to freedom of political communication. And this reference to IBAC, this implication of corruption was problematic, and there was a finding of misconduct. So ultimately, Councillor Kellander has been suspended for a 7-day period, and that is the determination.
Thanks for that analysis, Tony. Really interesting one here. And of course, as I alluded to before, there's been some prior issues between these two councillors. If I remember rightly, not that long ago, there was a finding against Councillor Briffa with no sanction, and there was a finding against Councillor Kellander with an apology required. This one's obviously stepped it up a little bit. One thing that occurs to me when we see a 7-day suspension here, 31-day suspension at Susan Bissiger, etc., are we starting to get a bit of a framework from these arbiter decisions of the length of a suspension against the seriousness of an offence? Can we start to draw some conclusions there?
Look, I think it would have been telling or meaningful for the arbiter that Councillor Kellander had offered to apologise.
Right.
So there wasn't a doubling down, if you like. So I think it's a relatively short suspension, obviously 7 days, and so I think that we would say this was on the lower end of the misconduct spectrum, if you like, but still certainly lessons to be drawn. But I agree with you that we're getting that library of decisions, and we can see where the we get some guidance at least for councillors in terms of what not to do.
Interesting, Chris. Am I missing something here? But isn't this sort of normal practice that councillors would get together before a significant meeting like the annual meeting where the mayor and the deputy mayor are going to be appointed, and that councillors would have discussions behind closed doors to understand some of these, who's interested, not to make any decisions, because at the end of the day, it's about the decision on the floor at the council meeting. It's not about, regardless, we've seen situations here where councillors have had those discussions behind closed doors, and then it's come to the council meeting and they've changed their mind, and people that thought they were going to be mayor are not mayor.
And so, how awkward is it when that happens? I've been in the room when that's happened
very
as well.
Embarrassing. And in situations like that I've seen, that's where relationships break down and where there's issues associated with then, behaviour between councillors, because, those councillors are then really, really angry with those people that haven't supported them. So I think, I was a bit surprised, and I just sort of thought, well, I think that's common practice that they would get together. I think that what Councillor Briffa had suggested was just common practice across local government. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I think Councillor Briffa's statement was it was not meant to be, Tony. I think he said a de facto decision-making process. Well, I'm sure it wasn't meant to be, but nor can it be, because the decision cannot be formally made until it comes into the chamber. So there's that subtlety there. But how many councillors would go into a council chamber in a public forum and put their hand up for mayor, not knowing whether they're going to get support or not from around the room? I mean, would anybody really do that?
Yeah, I agree that it's unlikely. But I think what's important here is that even though that might be the common practice, it wouldn't be misconduct for a councillor to say, I don't agree with that practice. So the arbiter's saying it wasn't misconduct for Councillor Kellander to say, I think that that's inappropriate, regardless of the fact that it happens often and regularly. That was fine to make those public statements. I'm not going to participate in this. I don't think it should be done this way. And we all will have views on what's practical. What crossed the line here was saying that it was corrupt, or at least I don't think that word was necessarily, but saying that it was collusive conduct
and linking it to Operation Sandon.
Referring to Operation Sandon, which had that implication of corruption. So so there may be a broad range of opinions out there, and some councillors may well say, you know what, I'm not going to participate in those meetings, and may well broadcast that view publicly as to why they don't want to do that, and that wouldn't be misconduct in itself.
Yeah.
And I think in practice, Chris, that's what happens, is that you'll get those meetings happening behind closed doors, and there will be councillors that won't turn up because they won't want to have those discussions. So, and they're well within their rights to do that. So I would agree with what Tony's saying. Yeah.
There are always some interesting elements that come out of these matters, aren't there? That I think we can all, and when I say all, the sector can learn from and take some guidance from. So thank you, Tony, for that detailed analysis of that decision. The decision of the arbiter was tabled at a council meeting earlier this week and is online along with the council papers for that meeting. Let's move on. There's a little storm brewing down in Shire, and I know we have a lot of support for VLGA Connect and the Local Government News Roundup down in the Bawbaw area. In fact, the Bawbaw Mayor Anne-Marie McCabe came on yesterday morning's edition, I should say, of the Local Government News Roundup to explain what's happening here with this place naming policy. The brief version of this is a new policy about place naming of features, etc., in the municipality was adopted at the February meeting. It calls for 70% of suggestions for new naming processes to recognise women as a way of trying to address the imbalance of naming across the municipality. Some have taken issue with that, calling it a quota, calling it woke, etc. And while it did pass, there's now a rescission motion that has been lodged to have that turned over at the April meeting. I think it will be in the early April. It's a shame to see this playing out in the way that it is. Tony, as I understand it, the policy is aligning with a state government strategy to try and set those sorts of markers to try and address the balance here.
Yeah, I mean, we see quotas in all sorts of components now of society. I'm not surprised that there's widespread discussion and strongly held views on this. Quotas are controversial. I've heard strong arguments both for and against having quotas to, achieve equity. But this was a tight vote, as you say, a 5-4 vote, and so no doubt the concept of a rescission motion will be hotly debated as well.
So Tony, and in this case, I think it's important we say that while some have argued that it's a quota, the council on the policy clearly says it's a target, and there is a difference between a target and a quota, isn't there? I know it might be subtle, but there is. Tony, the thing that falls out of this for me, and you might have a view on this, is being a rescission motion being lodged. We've always been told, those of us who've worked around the sector for a while, that you can't rescind something unless it has not been acted on. And I've heard behind the scenes there's a bit of toing and froing about whether the act of adopting the policy means that it's been acted upon and therefore can't be rescinded. But it's not that simple, is it?
No. So in the context of this particular set of facts, I think if the council had voted to adopt a whole set of names, for example, and then had gone off and ordered the signs and spended money on that, or even just notified a supplier that we're entering into a contract now for the creation of those signs, that might well be acted upon. I see that acted upon really particularly in planning decisions where a party wins or loses, being notified. Procurement particularly, no doubt other examples, but in terms of policy, I think policy is always up for review and potential change.
I think that's a really good point. So the examples you provided about procurement and planning decisions, etc., that's where that rule of, if it's been communicated, the outcome of the decision has been communicated to the parties, that you could then determine or feel that it's been acted upon. But in the case of a policy, as you say, it can always come back for change.
Yeah, and essentially, and the implication of being communicated being that if you then, about faced, then what would happen is that someone would potentially suffer a loss in reliance on the earlier decision. They've geared up, the suppliers employed more people, rejected other sort of potential potential supplies in order to satisfy this one, meet this one.
Julie, it's disappointing, I feel, I'm not sure how you feel, to see this playing out in such a way, hard on the heels of International Women's Day and all that great work that was done last week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to come to the table bias in this space, Chris, because I feel for what they're trying to do, and particularly, like you said, off the back of International Women's Day and these stories that we continue to hear, it makes me feel really frustrated. But look, the council will now reconsider it. I agree with what Tony's saying about the rescission motion. I agree that can be enacted now. They can go back with the rescission motion. Let's see what comes out of it. I thought that Councillor McCabe spoke very well on the roundup, really explained it well, and I could understand what they were trying to achieve in terms of the targets, and think it's great they're working to supplement, I suppose, be consistent, but supplement what the government are trying to achieve overall.
So important to note here, I think it's believed that this is a first in regional, certainly rural Australia, for a council to codify this in a policy in the way that they have done, and of course that means a lot of other councils are going to be looking at what happens here if they're thinking of following suit, and it'll set some sort of precedent, Tony.
Yeah, so it's on the tail of, I think, the City of Melbourne has been through or in the process of a similar exercise. So the City of Melbourne had their plan to prioritise naming new roads and places after the Aboriginal names of those places and those of prominent women. And there was that draft place and road naming policy went out for community consultation in November, December of last year. The community feedback wasn't particularly supportive. 60% of the respondents didn't support those proposed priorities. So there's a revised policy version of that policy to be presented to the City of Melbourne councillors in the April meeting cycle as well. So there's a number of councils considering this. It's fair to say there's a divided view in the community, clearly, on some of these issues.
All right. So as Julie said, Anne-Marie McCabe was on the Local Government News Roundup. It's episode 3112, folks, if you'd like to go back and have a listen to that, which came out yesterday and you'll find on your podcast player. Let's move on. Inner city, Yarra punching above, well, maybe not punching above its weight, but certainly leading the way in its consideration of increasing fees for large vehicles. This has got a lot of attention in the media, and not just in Victoria, Tony and Julie. This has gone all around the country, and it sparked a national conversation about the impact of the size of vehicles in inner cities, particularly where space is really at a premium.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, this one, because in short, Yarra are going to investigate whether parking fees should be increased for larger vehicles like SUVs and trucks. Okay, and it's interesting because council members have noted in discussing this that there's added danger that larger vehicles pose to the road, particularly in those inner, very, very narrow streets of inner Melbourne. So this was reported in the ABC News. Like you said, it's gone pretty much out
wide.
there.
Yeah,
pretty wide.
And so when we say trucks, Julie, we're really sort of talking, the American pickup trucks, which are the large cars that they call a truck. And, we think of a truck as something different, but we're not talking about, semi-trailers and those sorts of trucks in this case. Yeah.
And this was a motion, Chris, at Yarra Council on Tuesday night, which was put forward by the Greens councillor Sophie Wade, with a proposed plan to investigate this ways to make travelling on Yarra streets more equitable. So very, very interesting. So suggesting imposing these proportional parking fees based on the size. So she referred to the inner streets of, say, Fitzroy, the tiny streets that exist, and if you buy yourself a Hummer, in one of those streets, they're sort of saying, well, it's going to have a pretty significant impact on that street. And
Well,
they're
I think
concerned-
I think even one of the councillors called into question the intelligence of the people who buy those sorts of vehicles,
Oh,
which
I
I thought was a
know.
little bit tough. But if
Yeah.
I could ask Tony, this is my devil's advocate question here: do councils have the power to bring in? I guess this is part of the investigation. These sorts of charges that apply to different size vehicles.
Yeah, look, they certainly have the power to, deal with parking enforcement and fees for and setting fees for parking on council controlled roads. I guess there's some argument that potentially people might make about whether that's fair or not. But I think if ultimately we are talking about, the Ford F-150s and the Dodge Rams, Chev, Silverados, these are the 6 meter long vehicles that are built to tow big caravans and trailers and horse floats and these sorts of things, then I think most of us would probably say that makes a lot of sense. I think where the equity issue comes in is, I think back years ago when our 4 children were young and we had the Kia Grand Carnival bus, we had that because we had to fit them in somehow, or before that was the Fairmont station wagon. So it was longer to fit the children in. And so some people are forced to do that. And I think there's a level of acknowledgement at Yarra City Council about that. And I think there's a place for these vehicles. It's not in the inner city. If you live in the inner city, that makes sense to me. What I think is creating, why I think there's particular controversy is the largest selling vehicles in Australia are SUV trucks, the Toyota Hilux, the Ford Ranger. Now, I don't know if this is ultimately targeted at them. They're about, 5.3, 5.4 sort of meter long vehicles, I think, versus, 6 meter long vehicles essentially in these big trucks. There's a lot of people that buy those Toyota Hiluxes, Ford Rangers. They're the top 2 selling vehicles in Australia.
Yeah.
So I guess there's some angst around that. For those of us like I think you and I, Chris, who live out in the on acreage and that often drive bigger vehicles because it makes sense. But I certainly wouldn't be keeping my large SUV if I lived in Fitzroy North.
Yeah.
Wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, all right. Problematic. We'll watch how this one plays out. I'm not sure how long it will take for that report to come back to Yarra, but it's, as we said, it's going to be watched not just locally, but further afield as well. Here's one I reckon you might have a view on, Julie. Last week, the Australian government announced a 1,000 square metre offshore wind farm zone, which comes between 15 to 20 kilometres of the Warrnambool Port Fairy coastline. The council there, Warrnambool City Council, while being a supporter of renewable energy, is very concerned about what this means for the marine environment, and they're saying they're going to advocate pretty strongly for the best possible outcome for its community. Planning and future development and climate change and all of it coming hard up against some pretty understandable environmental concerns, Julie.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And look, interesting in this circumstance is that, and not surprising really, is that this is a federal government decision and a planning matter over which the council has no statutory power. And the council have made that very, very clear on their website when they've put this information out to the community, saying that they're really concerned about how close it is to the coastline of Warrnambool and Port Fairy. And they actually do talk about what's happened out in the eastern Victoria, what's happened there. But they're very concerned about it. They've called, they're aware that there's a community meeting that's been called for the 23rd of March, where the Warrnambool community have been asked to about available options. And while this is no time to be complacent, they're saying, it's also not helpful to give people the impression that the declaration will be reversed or rescinded. So they're being really honest in saying, look, turn up to this meeting, but don't expect that they're going to, walk away from this decision. So they're saying that they're suggesting to the community that the community should approach this federal matter with a simple referendum style, do we want it or not? You know, have this binary approach, which will not achieve the best outcome for Warrnambool. So interesting that this meeting is going to happen. It's going to be interesting to see what happens out of that. They apparently did run a community engagement process in August last year, Chris, attended by the CEO, Andrew Mason, and several councillors, but obviously they're still pressing ahead with it. So they're talking about, they're worried about Logan's Beach, they're worried about the visual impacts, and their council has previously opposed the use of seismic testing as well for exploration of gas and oil, and obviously they're raising that in their concerns on their website. So it is one to watch. It'll be interesting in this case to see what happens, whether there's any shifting at all of the location based on the concern by the community. Don't know, but again, we're in this space where local government has no say, communities have very little influence over what could be major impact.
All right. Well summarised, Julie. Anything to add, Tony?
No, look, I agree with what the Mayor, Ben Blaine, is reported as saying, which is, as Julie said, it's not a simple yes-no equation, really, for the councillor community. It might be these offshore wind farms are going to be facilitated because it's part of the Australian government's program for renewable energy, but maybe it's maybe there's a tinkering in terms of precise location, distance from the coastline that allows these facilities still to proceed, but maybe there are some sort of minimum standards that the community sort of means that they're better able to accommodate and live with the day-to-day amenity issues that these facilities create.
I'd love to get Ben Blaine on the roundup next week to talk a bit more about this. He's one of the few mayors I don't have a number for. So if anyone's watching who can connect me with Ben easily, that would be appreciated. So we'll keep a watching brief on that issue. Now, the new Mayoral Advisory Panel for 2024 has been announced, and we might put the names of the successful mayors here on the screen. We've got 10 mayors from around the country. And Tony and Julie, this is the first time I've seen the panel sort of constituted as being mainly representatives of other advocacy groups, such as Regional Councils Victoria, Rural Councils Victoria, the Association of Bayside Municipalities, etc., which in a way makes it a little bit easier to get that spread too of different types of councils, doesn't it?
Yeah, I like that approach, Chris. I think that seems to be much more equitable across Victoria. So, and a nice diversity as well sitting within that group. So they've obviously thought about it really carefully. The approach towards having this and having the diverse number of mayors around the table to discuss matters with the minister, I think is really great. I think there's some really great people in there that will make a really significant contribution. The likes of Councillor Jenna Davey-Burns, who is doing some really great work, particularly in social media, promoting what's going on down at Kingston. And obviously Denise Massoud, who's been a significant contributor to the Eastern Group of Councils, but also to the sector as a whole. So great to see some of those leaders in the community getting a Guernsey and working with the minister on what the hot topics are that need to be addressed.
Yeah. So we've had the names on the screen there. You can see all the different councils that are represented. 10 is too many just to read through, I think, at this point in time. But what the minister's really said this week is that the panel this year is expected to focus its work on governance, representation and inclusion, which I guess all feeds into the fact that it's an election year and we've got elections coming up in, what is it now, about 7-8 months?
Yeah, and definitely hot topics of the moment. So
yeah. Absolutely. All right. What's next on our list here? New South Wales councils have been told to stop using a ticketless parking system. This came in a few years ago under the previous government. 48 councils in the state have been using it. What it means is the tickets go electronically to Revenue New South Wales. The downside of this is we're told that many drivers who receive a fine don't actually know they've received a fine until it comes to them at some later point, which reduces their ability to gather evidence and challenge. Tony, with your legal eye on this, it does sound like a bit of a one-sided system in that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can see there's an attempt for perhaps some efficiency, and what I think the promoters this would say is, we take photographs of the vehicle in situ, and they're available. We send a link when we send the infringement notice. But as you say, what the typical scenario for us, what we're used to, is you come back to your vehicle, there's a ticket on the windshield, and if one wanted to, say, challenge the fine, one would then, look around and consider where they parked and take your own photos that were supportive of your own position. And if 2, 3, 4 weeks later, you get a notice in the mail, and that's the first knowledge you have of this, and the owner of the vehicle gets it, so not necessarily the driver at the time, that makes your, seeking a review a little bit harder. There's also that immediate deterrent when you come back to the vehicle, there's a ticket, and you think, oh, yeah, I've parked in the wrong spot, I better be more careful. Whereas if you get it 2 months later, who knows if you're it's memorable to you, precisely what you did wrong. And there's also the risk that you get multiple tickets. Like if you park in that spot 3 or 4 times and get booked each day, you might get a nasty notice subsequently. But interesting. It's New South Wales. It's not in Victoria. But one would expect that these new technologies and things are potentially on the way across Australia.
I think it might have sort of come in sort of during COVID times as a way of removing a few steps of handling in that, but it's led to these 48 councils using it, making up about half of all fines that are being sent to Revenue New South Wales. So it's certainly responsible for a lot of the fines. And the government has not only told those councils to stop using it, they've told all other councils you cannot start using it. So they've effectively put the kibosh on the whole system.
And it's interesting, Chris, because I think the argument from the councils was, hang on a minute, we've had people that have been out there, sort of administering and, giving parking fines, and they've been threatened. They've been in a situation where they're very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So this has taken that threat to those officers away, so there is an argument about that. But it also seems what they're saying is that there's just a simple fix. There might be just one way that you could notify the driver very simply. So it might just be an admin fix that might be needed to then notify the driver very efficiently that they've received a ticket. So there might be just a quick fix that could come in. So let's hope that it is, because then the back administration can maybe continue the way it is and be more efficient, because we have to become more efficient in what we do. There's no opportunity to be complacent about this because of the financial sustainability of councils going forward. We need to turn to this technology to be able to survive, I think.
Good points you make.
I was going to say, in terms of revenue, Julie and Chris, trivia question: how much money do you reckon City of Sydney gets from parking fines each year?
Good question. You obviously know. I'm going to take a stab at.
Only because I've looked it up. I didn't know.
Tony, what proportion of that is their income? That's what I'm interested in. So what is the revenue, and do we know what the proportion is?
Look, I just know how much they get. They get $42 million a year. That's just the City of Sydney, which is obviously the largest, absolutely, in terms of revenue from parking fines. There wouldn't be another council in New South Wales that gets anywhere near that amount of money. But it's very important to their budget.
Yeah.
And what would that buy you? 42 million in today's terms. That might get you half an aquatic centre.
Yeah, that's well, you'd be lucky, I think, based on some of the
You'd be
reports I've seen, that to get half.
So in
But
the scheme of it, what
yeah,
the cost of everything is nowadays is probably pretty insignificant,
yeah, all
I think.
good points. All right, so that's happened this week. Also in New South Wales, the Daily Telegraph published a summary of a survey that was carried out by the New South Wales branch of the Australian Local Government Women's Association, which revealed alarming rates of sexism and bullying in councils, and of course a lot of that towards female councillors. This is all part of this ongoing narrative about barriers to not only women putting their hand up to run for council, but also women staying in those roles post one term or even a full term. I don't intend to spend a lot of time on this because I know Julie, Tony, you and Steve had a great discussion last week about some of these issues.
Yeah, we did. And I think my heart sinks again, Chris, when I see this, and I just go, oh, it's in New South Wales as well. And, does it mean that it's across the board in Australia? Probably.
It is.
This trend is not going away. How can we fix this? And I thought that, some of the suggestions that have come out of the work from La Trobe and Melbourne University is really good. It's been a really good piece of work. But yeah, I was disappointed to see it. I've got to be disappointed.
Look, I think I don't doubt that there's sexist commentary and chauvinistic attitudes across councils because they exist in society, don't they? And so councils is, a microcosm, if you like, of society. We've got this broader issue about conduct, and look, I think that's an issue across councils, across genders. My view is I don't think gender explains that issue significantly. I think that we're in a term where we've got the highest, in Victoria at least, the highest proportion of female councillors we've ever had. And yet I haven't seen the figures, but anecdotally, at least for me, I'm seeing more code of conduct matters. So I don't know that we'll solve the code of conduct issue by simply, equalising the genders. I think that that we're seeing across genders, male and female councillors being both applicants and respondents, being both findings of misconduct, etc. So I think there's a genuine issue around conduct, regardless of how people identify and on what their sex is.
And
Yeah, good point.
Chris, reflecting on all of this, it's just like this societal problem that you mentioned. It's kind of, you can see it if you've got children, you can see it and hear it in schools. So that the next generation are still dealing with these kind of issues at that young age, and that continues to build over a period of time. So we still haven't eradicated it. Whether we ever will, I don't know. We probably never will, but it's festering even in schools now.
We have to keep trying, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Queensland elections are this week. I know you're aware of this because you talked about the Ryan Balden Lumsden case last week on the Gold Coast, which has been playing out for some months. We'll know what happens there in a few days. But interesting stat, the ABC's done some analysis of the candidates for elections across Queensland this weekend. And this is indicative of a trend that I've been hearing about in other states as well. A 10% drop in the number of candidates, a 33% rise in uncontested positions, so one candidate only for positions being elected unopposed. What this analysis doesn't talk about so much that has happened in other states is seats for councillors that have not been filled because they've had no candidates at all. There's an in-person election in Western Australia happening, believe it or not, this Friday to fill a vacancy that has been carried since last year's elections because nobody nominated for it. A concerning trend across the sector, I would put to you right now.
And it's interesting, Chris, because I'm getting questions from CEOs about what my view is about whether there's going to be a drop in potential candidates coming forward because of the behaviours that are so prevalent now, these, poor behaviours that is happening across local government that's getting a lot of traction. So is that putting potential candidates off saying, look, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with these kind of behaviours. Or, you know, in this time of stress, when I'm, you know, dealing with all of these, you know, the stress in my life around, you know, just surviving and living, etc. Do I really want to spend time giving back to the community in this time of hardship?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether we're going to get a drop here in Victoria as well. I hope not. And I think this campaign that we spoke about last week to try and encourage more women to stand, hopefully that will help. But, you know, we need more of those types of campaigns, I think. And I know a lot of councils are doing a lot of good work locally to encourage people to run. So let's hope that helps as well.
Time will tell, I guess, and we do spend a lot of time, I think, as we need to, talking about the issues that need to be dealt with. You know, this incivility movement, the hostile cultures. We'll come to a story out of Canada in a moment about that. Is that putting people off putting their hand up in the first place, do you think, Tony?
Well, I don't doubt that it would, although I think that you never really know what it's like until you're there. And so to me, a lot of this is coming on social media because, you know, it's the courage of anonymity that you can have on social media. I was interested here that, you know, in this article, they quoted an academic, someone from Griffith University of Political Science, Paul Williams, and his theory was along the lines that Julie mentioned in terms of, you know, the economic malaise, the cost of living is such that people are so inwardly looking at, you know, surviving and managing that they're not outwardly looking in terms of community engagement perhaps as much, or lack that emotional energy to, you know, to get involved in something like council. I think that's an interesting theory. I can see how that might play out. I think people who are ambitious, who really want to have an impact in their local community, probably will still put their hands up. I still think that unless you've experienced some of this, as you describe it, incivility, you really don't know what's involved. It can be, you know, it's when it's directed at, not just at you, when it's directed at your family, at your physical appearance, etc.
A couple of other stories I want to get to, but before we get off this, just let me put something else to you from a devil's advocate point of view. We often hear, particularly around states like Victoria, New South Wales, that people don't put their hand up because the position isn't valued enough. The recompense is not significant for the time that's involved. Yet we know, and I know you talked about this last week, in Queensland, councillors are remunerated very handsomely, but here we've got a case where they do get a much higher level of remuneration, but we've got a fall in the number of people putting their hands up. So does that put paid to the theory that you need to pay more to get better candidates and more candidates?
Yeah, and I don't think it's clearly not the sole solution. As you say, you know, remote regions in Queensland, a mayor gets $120,000, $250K, you know, in the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, etc. So significant remuneration. Look, I think there are multiple reasons, and I think they're beyond simply what's going on in local government. I do think what's happening more broadly in society impacts on the level of engagement of people in their local communities and their willingness to be you know, contributing in that sense to the local community.
All right. I did just want to make a note in passing about a councillor at Colac, Otway, who's been in the news due to an incident that happened at a council meeting, which was adjourned out of concern for the welfare of that councillor. The meeting's currently subsequently been reconvened and dealt with. This councillor, Councillor Tosh Jake Finnegan, has bared their soul really on LinkedIn about the issues they've been dealing with, mental health issues. We just want to send out our best wishes. What Councillor Finnegan has done, and I think admirably, is taken a step back from full-time council duties while they deal with their health, and they'll come back when they feel they are capable of doing that. But just another sign of the pressures, perhaps, that elected representatives are under.
Yeah, wish a speedy recovery to Tosh Jake Finnegan.
Yes,
Absolutely.
indeed. So in Canada this week, the mayor of the fourth largest city in the country, the city of Ottawa, his name is Mark Sutcliffe, has hit out at a hostile online culture for elected officials and municipal employees. If you get a chance to listen to this interview, it is worth 8 minutes of your time, I think is about all it runs. But we've had a recent mayor step down, particularly citing the hostility that they've experienced in trying to do the job for their community. This mayor's had his office broken into by an intruder, and he's saying enough is enough.
Yeah. Look, I think I really empathise with his comments when he said, there's nothing wrong with criticisms of policy, criticisms of decisions. I don't agree with this decision of my local council because A, B, C, D. There was a better decision, better way they could have decided, etc. But when it goes to a personal attack, attacking the integrity of the person, claiming that they must be corrupt purely because simply they've made a decision that you don't like, language like they're on the take. These you can create memes now of images of people, can be very cruel online, and not only hurtful to the individual, but hurtful to the people around them that care and love them, their families, etc.
Yeah.
So I just think that we all, when we express an opinion, have got a real duty to think, are we attacking the issue or actually the person?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
Personal.
good point. Very good point, Tony.
All right, we'll pop the link to that in the show notes if you'd like to have a listen. And to finish off, folks, I've picked a little story. It's quite a few quirky stories to choose from this week. Maybe we'll get a chance to get to more in future weeks. But a little town in France called Seine-Port, it's about 2,000 people in the village, has passed a local law banning people from using their smartphones in public. It's been described as the scrolling ban. They say it's antisocial. They say children shouldn't have mobile phones as early as they're getting them before the age of 15, etc. I mean, the sting here is it's not enforceable. The police can't actually uphold it. But this town council is making a stand here. What do we think about that?
Chris, I've got to say, with a teenager, it's like music to my ears. Because of the time that teenagers spend on their phones, and you see them walking down the street and you walk the dog and you see this person coming towards you on their phone and they walk straight into you because they're
it's a safety issue too, isn't it?
So I just think it is a little bit hilarious, but good on them for trying. And, it might build a culture of, acceptance, and there's a bit of a moral sort of obligation there to do the right thing in your community or whatever. But I just can't see teenagers,
and not just teenagers, Julie.
to anything like that,
Not just teenagers. When I read this, I thought that's I'm a bit supportive, but then I started to think about it. I've just spent a few days in a couple of New Zealand sites, and I've had my phone with data looking at Google Maps to find a particular thing. So is that going to become illegal to use your device to get around?
Well, that's what they're saying. I think in this
you can't do it in Seine-Port.
No, I think it's overkill, isn't it? They're saying in cafes, in restaurants, on park benches, strolling down the street. I think it's a bit, I'll use that word, Luddite, anti-new technology. I agree with everything Julie said about perhaps us feeling there's an over-reliance on these devices. I'm a user of public transport each day to get in and out, and, that people, we used to talk to the person on the seat across from us. Now we seem to stare at our mobile phones. But using the law to change attitudes to this, I think is probably the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think there could be better ways to have this discussion in the community. But I don't think you're going to be able to ever get, in this generation, get people off their phones. We're all addicted to our phones. You
Yeah.
know, it's the way that we connect nowadays. And yeah, look, I thought it was a novel idea.
And we're talking
If you don't
about
know
it,
someone over there, and then we could find
yeah.
out whether it actually works.
But we're talking about it on the other side of the world. So perhaps they've achieved something by raising the level of discussion about the actual issue.
Yeah, it is a big problem, I think, in society, and we can see that with our children coming through and how differently they communicate between each other now, and how you know, you can see that they're losing the art of conversation. You know, I'm getting on my mother high horse now, so you better get me down from my
All
box.
right, we need to get her off. Okay, so that's where we draw the line for this week. Just to say, we've recorded this episode a little bit earlier than usual because I'll be at Fast Track on Friday. You will too, Tony Rownick. I know you're one of the top line speakers. I disagree with your comments last week on the program at the Melbourne Town Hall for VLGA Fast Track on Friday the 15th. We've got a talking about gender equity issues. We've got a global panel discussing some of those issues on Thursday evening of next week. So get in and register to be part of that conversation. It could not be more topical at the moment. So lots coming up from the VLGA. Tony, please pass out our thanks to the team at Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for the ongoing support of TGU. Julie, have a great week. You said you were heading somewhere up country.
Oh, yes, I've just been up to Wodonga and I've had a fantastic time. So they're great people up there. So nice to be away. Next week, I'm off to Morwell. So I'm getting around Victoria and it's really enjoyable.
Excellent. All right. Have a great week. We'll see you all back here next week for more of TGU. That stands for the Governance Update from VLGA Connect. Good to have you with us. Bye for now.